tell us what he knows about our family history, and Aunt Alice, and the other sisters that know anything. We're going to let them come and tell us about our supposedly great-grandmother Bellstar.
So they like to starve to death in New York while they were tramping the streets before they got out of town, and they finally had to leave town or starve to death. And when they got out of town, well, they found out that they were in bad shape. They'd run away on a stowaway boat, got over here, and the Civil War was going on. And that was the North and South, so they didn't know who to take sides with. They'd run away from the revolution in Ireland. See, it got over here and there was a revolution going on over here, the same thing. So they started tramping west, getting out of New York, and they worked along and done odd jobs or anything they could get to do, and begged and everything else. And they got as far as Kentucky. And when they got out in Kentucky, well, they got acquainted with some guys that they were traveling on and thrown in with, and they began to find out about the Civil War, about how it worked and who was against who and all, and they could join these raiders and different things like that. They didn't have to be a soldier, so they threw in with them, and the supposition of his point was that they just threw in with these raiders and joined the gang and were one of the gang, see, and they were freebooters, that's what they called them. They could go over to the
This was
north.
your dad? This was your dad?
My dad told about that, and all these three brothers done that, see.
Okay.
He was telling me what those three brothers done, according to his way of thinking.
What was the name of them?
I don't know, there was three brothers. They were Tom and Isaac and something else.
But they were called, what kind of raiders?
Yeah.
What was the other word?
Freebooters or raiders or
Freebooters?
whatever you want to put it as. Well, there's another word for it too, but it's not an outlaw, but it's a kind of an outlaw band. I guess you could call it that. But they joined up with them and they raided. They'd raid the north and steal food, corn and stuff for the horses and things like that, and take it over to the south. And then on the south side, they wouldn't raid the army quarters, but they would raid the farms of the people that had the corn and material and that stuff to eat, see. They'd raid them and steal their stuff too for these band that they were in. So it didn't make any difference. They'd steal from either side. They could steal from it. Didn't matter. So he told me that that's what they did. And in the meantime, well, his father accumulated a place, or got a hold of a place on the Cowskin River. And when he was about 6 years old,
This was your father?
this was my father, when he was about 6 years old, well, that's about as far back as he could remember, but he remembered that the old man had a place across in Oklahoma Territory, across the Cowskin River. The Cowskin River was the line where they lived. See, that's the line between Missouri and Oklahoma. Well, their home's place was supposed to have been in Missouri, next to the river, next to the Cowskin River. So the old man had this place across the river, and he had a lot of wild hogs that was running over there. And he also had an apple orchard, and he didn't know how many years that the apple orchard had been there, but it raised lots of good apples. So in the wintertime, this was an old military road that this homesteads and houses were lived on. And immigrants came by during the winter months, and they'd get snowed in there at that crossing, you know, on the river. And the old man he had a log shack over on the other side of the river. And he'd go over there and let those immigrants camp in that shack. And he'd go over there and round up them hogs and kill hogs, and they had a smokehouse over there. And they'd do that on the halves, and those immigrants would cut and divide those hogs, and he'd fill that smokehouse full of meat. and then when the wintertime would be gone, well, he'd bring it back over to the house and they'd have meat. But when he was supposed to be about 6 years old, the best he could remember was when his father was killed. And his father was killed in the Cowskin River, and he thought that somebody shot him. Some of the neighbors told him, or passed this around, that they thought he was shot. And some of them thought that this horse threw him off in the water and pulled him and killed him. He was kind of a mean horse. He was a stallion. And he'd been in the water about a week. Is that the way you understood it when they found him?
Several days.
So, several days, and his face had kind of been mutilated, and they thought it was a bullet hole that hit him in the cheek or something, so he killed him. But anyway, when they buried him, or whenever they put him away, well, he was supposed to have been about 6 years old, and up until that time, well, his father would ride away with different groups that come in, and he always thought that they were the Jameses and the Youngers and all that, and the Daltons. They lived in the community, and when he was school age, well, he went to school with the Dalton children, two of the youngest children. There was Emmett Dalton that came to California and got in the real estate business after he got out of the penitentiary. He served for train robbery. You remember that, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And Emmett and his younger sister, there was two younger kids than the other Daltons, and Pop went to school with them. And he told one incident where they had a Christmas tree, and he was just started to school, hadn't been in school but a little bit, talked like maybe he was a first or second grader or something like that. You might remember this incident, but he said that there was a bunch of rough boys, teenagers up about grown, see, that come in and was going to break up the Christmas tree. You remember him telling that? And so while it was in progress, well, the Dalton boys had been somewhere, and they heard of it, and they came to the schoolhouse, and they came in on these rough ones and kicked them all out, beat them up, and sent them home and sent them on their way. And that was the first time that he knew anything about the Dalton boys being real rough. But these Dalton boys were supposed to have took a fella out and hung him that had he'd insulted or abused their younger sister, so they took him out and hung him, and that was one of the first crimes that they committed. And then one of the Daltons was a, what do you call them? What did they do? What was the title where they rode the territory? A marshal. One of them was a marshal, and he died in the line of duty, and he wasn't a bank robber. And at that time they hadn't started robbing banks, but later on they went to that, and when the Daltons were killed in the bank robbery in 18 and 90 something, I think it was 92 or 93 or somewhere up in there.
Speak up good, because they're taping it.
So he was living in the community there, and he went to this funeral when some of these Dalton boys were buried.